Thank you for joining this demonstration of Odoo software. As you can see here, I've logged in and I'm at the main menu of a typical Odoo installation. Odoo is very flexible software, providing a variety of applications that can be installed to match the needs of the business. So in some cases, it may be a manufacturing or a distribution company that has physical inventory. In this case, I want to talk about how Odoo can work very well for service businesses. So if I return to the apps menu, we'll see that there's some apps here that I'll be able to walk through in this short demonstration that might represent, in this case, a small architecture firm, but could be applied to a variety of small to medium-sized businesses that offer services with different staff. So one of the areas that's common to a lot of business uses of Odoo is the contacts module. And that allows you to store the customers that you might be working with, the vendors, and the independent contractors that you might work with at any given point. Returning back, I also want to point out how there is basically what they call the CRM module, which would be a place where you could represent the different business opportunities that you have been investigating. And so even the smallest businesses will have some conversations and hear about project opportunities. And as a business grows, they may have ways of keeping to-do lists or flagging emails in an inbox. But over time, it gets to be a lot of moving pieces, and it really does seem to be helpful to have a customer relationship management module, but also one that is easy to use and get started with. And so what we have in Odoo here is what's called the Kanban view, or really list view. And it's just showing a couple of very basic opportunities and where they might be in the potential pipeline. And so there's a chance to get involved in a civic center bid, and that's very new, not much is known, and it's also not, it has a low probability at this point. And then as you move left to right, you can see that there could be a list of qualified opportunities, and then opportunities that are at the proposal stage. So maybe meetings have taken place and you've sent out a quotation for your services. And then finally, opportunities that you've won and the business is ongoing or about to start in the future. And it's very easy to add things to the list here. And so let's say you just hear through word of mouth, or you get a phone call and someone just says, hey, I don't know when I'm going to do this, but I would like to talk to you about a kitchen remodel. And so Odoo lets you start out with very basic information, and you can fill it in later. And if you've never worked with the customer before, there's not a long process to create a whole customer record. Again, you can just enter the name here, and if you could start a type ahead search, if they exist in your system, it'll come up. Otherwise, you can just finish the name and it'll go ahead and create that for you. And then you could just give it some sort of rough estimate of how big the project might be. So in this case, it may not be the largest project, and expected revenue 10,000, and it's not necessarily known to be that high of a priority. But that's what this very basic representation is whether it's kind of low, medium, or high priority to the business. And with that, it's done, and there's a first opportunity here. And you can use this as a reminder. You come to the screen. You also have the ability to schedule an activity if you want to schedule a phone call, or if you perhaps over the phone had said that you would send a background on your firm and some of the typical working relationship details. You could say, hey, I want to have that completed at some point by the end of next week. So you could just say follow up, end of next week. And we can go ahead and complete that. And as you follow this opportunity, you might be able to say, well, they seem more interested than I thought. So I'm going to move this along to qualified or even to proposition. And at some point, if you realize that there are more details that you want to start adding to the opportunity record, there is a full detail page behind what you initially created. And so here we can go into edit mode. Maybe the project's a little larger than you thought. And you say, it might be 50% likely at this point. And I expect that maybe we would hear by mid-September as to whether they want to move forward or not. There's an area to add internal notes. There's also the ability to add additional people in your organization. And this area here is often called chatter and allows you to have internal chats as well as chats with the client. I'm going to save this. One of the things that I think is a great advantage of Odoo is it really is configured to be an end-to-end solution for a variety of businesses. So it is a full-featured accounting platform. It's ready to replace QuickBooks or whatever you've been using to manage the financial aspects of your business. But it also will cover everything from the sales process, like we were just looking at, all the way through working with staff on your team and perhaps even freelancers. And one of the great benefits is time tracking, and then taking time tracking records and making sure that you invoice for the time that was logged against a project. So what I want to do here is continue working with one of these opportunities, show how it could become a closed contract, and how a team might get assembled to start working and logging hours against that contract. So let's pick up this kitchen and family room edition for the Williams family. And what we had been looking at was the CRM module, and it was really tracking the sales pipeline. And if you're a very small business, you may not have thought that you had a pipeline, but even a small 1 or 2 person firm, you know that there's a variety of things that you've spoken about, and they're not all going to come in at once. And then certainly as the business grows, you may have a salesperson or multiple salespeople whose sole job is to prospect and keep the pipeline active and moving forward. And as soon as things are ready to move beyond kind of the prospecting into real quotations, then it's very easy in Odoo to go into that opportunity and just start a new quotation. And in this case, if I were a physical goods company, let's say I sold widgets or jewelry or computer products, then I could start creating an order full of items physical goods that I was selling. In a service business here, our quotation is going to represent the services we expect to offer throughout the project. And so in this case, our products are really going to be architecture hours and related. And so through the phone calls that we've had with the Williams family, we have started to realize how large this project is. You might still use your other tools. You might have some Excel spreadsheets that you've used for past projects based on square footage. But at the end of the day, you do want to send some sort of quotation to the customer, letting them know what the financial aspects of the agreement might be. And so here for a project, given a small to medium-sized firm, you might have a few different levels of staff that can get involved in a project. And so for this project, you've worked with your project manager and your estimation process and figured out, I think we might need to get a principal architect involved for 40 hours at our normal billing rate of 170. And what we try to do is we don't need the principal architect involved in all aspects of the project. And so we will also, in order to keep the total cost of the project down, we might involve the associate architects to a greater degree. And so in this case, it could be 80 hours of expected time from the associate architect. And you could see this service has been defined with a different hourly rate. And finally, there might be some additional services that are in the drafting category and or project administration or project management, and that might have a third billable rate, and so that might be 30 hours in this case. And so now we have built the quotation for the Williams family. There's the ability to set an expiration date if you are afraid that this might sit out there too long and you want to let them know that this is valid only for a certain amount of time, etc. So I'm going to save this. Odoo has great features that allows you to communicate with your customers directly through the platform. If I were to hit send by email, the customer would get an email that would look very similar to what I'm going to look at in the customer preview here. And so it's going to tell them this is exactly the business terms of what we're looking to do. And you may have a PDF document that talks about the phases of the project and the advantages of choosing you as a firm, and then you could attach this as a PDF along with that as well. But this would be a way for them to review the contract and even choose to acknowledge and accept the contract, so you have a tracked record of it in the system. So I'm going to return to the quotation, and let's assume that they approved it either through clicking that button or calling in and saying over the phone that they were ready to move forward. One of the things that's great about Odoo and its configuration for service businesses is these products I've chosen, Odoo understands that they are services and that they are time-based deliverables. So now that this sales order is fully approved and it's considered a completed contract, then the system has automatically created a project as well as 3 tasks within that project. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click into the project, and we can see at this point there's nothing in the system, so there's no hours logged against the project. And you can see here there's no hours in the timesheets, but we can also see that from what was sold, these are the total expected number of hours by service type. And I can see that in more detail on the tasks view as well. I'm going to go out to the main menu and come through the project area. And so here we can see a list of the projects that are currently ongoing. We have the Durant first floor remodel. You'll see as we work on timesheets that there's also the ability to have an internal or non-billable project with some tasks against that, so that as any of us are working during the day, we try to have as many client billable hours as possible, but in many cases there are internal tasks that we want to log our time, but there's nobody to bill them towards. And here is our sales order number 3 that has automatically created a project to go with it. I'm going to edit this project, and instead of everybody having to get to know these sales order IDs, I'm going to give it a more friendly name. Which will make it easier to recognize in the timesheets. So you can see here in the project that it has the ability to accept timesheets and let people log time against tasks. And then we also want to be able to create invoices from the time logged against these tasks, which we'll show shortly. So I'm going to save these details. And the other piece that I am able to do at this point is we could decide to have only certain invited employees on the project, or we can make it visible to all employees. When it's a smaller, medium-sized firm, it's probably not a big deal for everybody to be able to see the project, but as your company grows, if you need to shield one department from another, then it's certainly possible. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to skip forward to, let's say we're 1 week into working on the Williams project, and I just want to show you the timesheets functionality. And so the current user that I'm logged in as is the principal at the firm. And so he has a full-featured access to many of the different parts of the application. We'll show in a minute how we can add perhaps a freelancer or an additional employee that would still have access to timesheets, but perhaps not access to the pipeline and the sales orders, things like that. So Odoo has some great controls over what people have access to and what they don't. And so I'm going to go to a previous week and think about getting my time entered for this new project. I worked a full week on that previous week for that project. So I'm going to add a line here. I'm going to find the Williams family remodel. And as Jeff, I'm the principal architect, so the task that I'll be working on is the principal architect services. And we'll start with my first date, and I'll say that I got 2 hours entered on that first date. And now, once I've chosen that line for the first time, I have this very easy to use week-long timesheet view. And you do have the ability to even go to a full month-long view to see a broader view of the hours. I'm going to return to that week. And so here I can, maybe I enter my hours day by day, or maybe I keep notes and I get them entered into the system at the end of the week. And so I can go in and I can say, all right, I was just getting started on Monday, but then I had some good solid days on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then Thursday was a nice long day, getting into some of the details. And then Friday I had some other things grab my attention. And here are some of my my admin tasks that took some of my time on this day. And so you could see it's quickly done the calculations for me to see, okay, across in the row, I was able to log 34 hours against the Williams project and 8 hours against admin tasks, and I could see my hours per day as well. And as your team is getting used to entering time, I also find that there's a nice feature where you might ask them to put a little bit of notes behind what was taking place with those hours that were entered. Once the number is in, you can hit this little plus sign, and the default description is just going to say timesheet entry, timesheet adjustment. And here you could ask your employees and your team to add some sort of description that would help you understand what they worked on, and perhaps you might print out the log of time entries and share them with the client if they wanted more understanding of where all the hours had come from. So this could be initial sketches and discussions with clients. And I can click out, and that's been saved, and then I can just return to my timesheets, and those details are there in the background. And so that's the principal architect, got his hours assigned to the project. But let's say this firm is growing relatively quickly, and there's more projects than there are staff right now. One of the other advantages is it's relatively easy and cost effective to add additional users to Odoo, again, with very limited rights and capabilities. And so let me show that concept by going to the settings area. And so let's say that we've found a freelancer, and she is able to come in and do some drafting work and perhaps some of the associate architecture level work. And so we could say, okay, well, Kim Andrews is our new hire. I'm going to send her an email and invite her to join Odoo. And so here you can see that Kim, through her email, has been directed to the Odoo site for the architecture firm, and she's being asked to set a new password to get logged in for the first time. And you can see as Kim has logged in, there are less apps displayed on her home screen than what Jeff was seeing on his. And so for the sake of this walkthrough, let's just go right into timesheets. And let's say Kim was able to get started that same week, and it's time for her to enter her hours. Then similarly, there would be maybe a quick start guide that you would offer to all your freelancers and all of your employees that just talks about how to set up your timesheet the first time with each project by doing two things. One, adding the non-billable tasks project. And in a lot of cases, the non-billable tasks might be admin tasks, or if they are going through some training and research that are certainly things they should be working on, but there's no client to bill, then that would be another type of non-billable task. And so let's say that was as she was getting started on that Monday, and she was starting to get familiar with all of the systems in the company. And so that took 3 hours. So we'll get that first day's task hours entered. And we'll also go through and get connected with the Williams Family Remodel project. And similarly, she was able to start doing some work against that project on that Monday. And in this case, she's been brought in to do drafting work. And so perhaps she was only able to log 2 hours against that project that first day. And so now as we go back and we focus on that week, the previous week, we can see that we have the project non-billable tasks, the training research task, and then the Williams Family Remodel, the drafting and administration task. And again, as the week goes on, she will be able to go ahead and log her hours here very easily. I'm typing the entries, hitting the tab key on the keyboard to make it go more quickly. You are allowed to use hours and minutes or decimals. So if I want to say 3 hours and 15 minutes, no problem with that. And if I want to say 3.5 hours, then I can make that kind of entry as well. And let's say we did ask her to work on Saturday. And so here we have a completed timesheet, and because she's hourly, she might not work a 40-hour week, just work as needed. So I'm going to leave the browser that we were using for Kim, and I'm going to return back to Jeff's view and start back at the menu. And as I return to the timesheets module, as Jeff, I have a couple of different ways to review timesheets. By default, I might come in and see the My Timesheets module, and that's where I enter my hours and keep track of my own week. But as an administrator, myself and any others also have the ability to go to all timesheets. And if we go back and look at last week, we can see that it's now showing timesheets of all users within the system. And so we have a summary of Jeff's activity, and then we also have a summary of Kim's activity here. And with Odoo, there's multiple ways to filter and view the data. If we wanted to filter by a certain employee or a certain project in larger companies, that's possible. And there's also different grouping capabilities. Let's say I wanted to see by project and by task. And so here I could see that, that Kim was doing drafting and administration work, whereas Jeff was doing principal architect services. And in addition to being able to view the timesheets, there are employee-manager relationships managed within Odoo that can also specify who needs to validate somebody's timesheet. And so if I go to the To Validate section and I go look at last week, then I can see that currently this is a timesheet that she has completed and it has not been validated yet. And so if I'm her manager or if I'm the principal at the firm, Then I can look these over, perhaps ask about where all of the hours came from. And again, as we saw before, you can click into the details to see any comments. And once I'm satisfied that this all makes sense, then I can validate. And this basically closes out that week and says, hey, okay, these hours are validated. And it also indicates that they would be appropriate to bill the client. And so now I'm going to go and just take a quick look at the employees module, because this is where we can also see that there's even though they may not be a full-time employee, this is still where you can manage a profile for that freelancer or for full-time employees. And this gives us a place to manage their contact information. This is where we can set who their manager is, who's responsible for timesheet reviews, what department they're in, etc. And within the HR settings area, we can also establish what was the hourly rate that we were willing to pay them. So let's say in this case that it was going to be $45 an hour. Okay. And so to finish up this example, I'm going to return back to the sales module. And I'm going to go into that sales order we created for the Williams family project. And again, we could see here that we had the original project agreement that was going to be 40 hours of principal services, 80 of associate, and 30 of drafting and admin. And in this example, these are just approximate numbers. So this project got off track in just 1 week, you might say. But you could see how the timesheets are instantly updated and available for people who are interested to review at the sales order level. And there are, of course, reports available in the system that can tell you across all projects how they are doing. We can also see some summary information here at the top that is pointing out that there's been 54 hours and 45 minutes recorded. And if we decide that this is the point in time that we want to create an invoice for work done to this date, then we can go ahead and use the create invoice function and continue forward. And so here we are in a draft invoice. It hasn't been saved yet. You have the ability to save it and then decide that it's ready to post. So that gives you some opportunity if you have an accounts receivable or accounts payable or a bookkeeper who's helping create invoices, but then the principal wants to review the invoices before they go out, then he or she can save but not post the invoice. And so here you can see that the system has kept track of who logged hours and also how they map to the products on the original sales order so that the client gets billed appropriately. So here the client is going to get billed for the 34 principal architect hours and the 20.75 drafting and admin hours. And so this invoice has been saved. If there's any additional information that needs to be brought in here, there can be a project reference. You can add a note. And again, as we saw before, there's very easy to use communication capabilities within Odoo. I'm going to save this. Again, it's still not an official invoice until I click post. If for some reason before I post it, I wanted to see exactly what it was going to look like, then I can do that as well. And so here I'm seeing just the services, the quantity, and the subtotal, and the comment that I added. This looks good to me. So I'm going to post this invoice. And then I have the ability to use Odoo to go ahead and send that invoice directly to the customer. And for some reason during the creation process, if you didn't get an email address for them, it'll prompt you. And You have the ability to add a personal note if you would like. You also have the ability, if there's additional people that need to get included on the email of the invoice, it's easy to add that there. I'm going to go ahead, send and print. And so not only has it been sent out, but you can see here in the chatter location, in this case, it's even prompting me to print it out if I had wanted it to work that way. Here you can see in the chatter, we have a history of this invoice, when it was created, when it was marked as posted, and when it was sent. And if we return back to the overall invoices screen, then this is a place where your bookkeeper can keep an eye on the overall list of outstanding invoices. So lastly, I will return back to the sales order and just point out how the sales order is going to keep everything linked together. And so I can see now that there's been one invoice that has gone out. And if I was the person who originally spoke to the Williams family and I wanted to just check in and see how the project was going, then I can always click into the project overview and I can see exactly what's been going on, who's been involved, who's been spending the hours. Somebody might want to look here and say, hey, we haven't really had an associate involved at this point, and we thought that was going to be the majority of the hours. Is there a way we can have the principal hand off what they've been working on to one of our associates? And so again, you can see a bit of a visual representation of who's been involved and who's billed however many hours. So hopefully this gives you a good sense of how Odoo can be used to really help organize your service business, keep track of hours, bring additional employees or freelancers into your projects while keeping organized and making sure that you're getting those hours billed out to clients.